You know those wines everyone talks about? The ones you see on every menu and hear at every dinner table? Well, forget them for a second. There's a whole other side to wine, bottles so rare and unheard of, they might as well be a secret. They come from places you wouldn't expect, with flavors you didn't think were possible. These wines are ranked from youngest to most vintage. The first on our list is Screaming Eagle. It all started in 1992 when a small, unknown winery in Napa Valley decided to release a modest 200 cases of Cabernet Sauvignon. Back then, no one expected this wine to be anything special. But then, something unexpected happened. In 1995, Robert Parker, one of the most influential wine critics, tasted that very wine. He rated it 99 points, almost perfect. It was a game changer. That one review created an instant demand, but the catch was simple. Only 200 cases were made. By 1997, the bottles were gone. Some of the few collectors who managed to secure a case weren't just drinking wine, they were sitting on a gold mine. In 2000, a Magnum bottle of that 1992 vintage fetched over $500,000 at an auction. That was when it became clear Screaming Eagle wasn't just a bottle of wine, it was a symbol. By now the world was paying attention, but the scarcity had already done its job. With each passing year, fewer bottles were available, making it harder and harder for anyone to taste what many had only heard of. Today, you can expect to pay thousands of dollars for a bottle, but the truth is that most collectors don't drink it. They simply hold on to it because owning a bottle means having a piece of Napa Valley's history in their hands. That's why Screaming Eagle is rare. Now that we've explored Screaming Eagle, let's travel to Australia for a wine born out of defiance and rebellion, the Penfolds Grange Hermitage 1951. Max Schubert, the winemaker, had a vision that went against the grain of time. In 1951, when Australian wines were mostly known for being fortified, Schubert set out to create a red wine that could rival the great Bordeaux wines. This wasn't just about crafting a quality wine, it was about defying expectations and boundaries. The board at Penfolds wasn't ready for Schubert's ambitious vision. They rejected the wine outright and told him to stop production. But Schubert wasn't one to be easily deterred. He went behind the company's back and continued making the wine in secret, using techniques he had picked up in Europe. He produced only small batches, each bottle a silent act of rebellion against the very institution that told him no. He gave away most of what he made, handing bottles to close friends, knowing full well that this was his only way of preserving the wine's legacy. For years, the 1951 Grange was an obscure secret, a whispered legend that very few knew about, but time did its magic. As the wine aged, it began to reveal its true value, not just in taste, but in history. It wasn't until decades later, when the world finally realized its worth, that the 1951 Grange started appearing at auction. In 2021, the wine's rarity and Schubert's defiance caught the world's attention when one of the last remaining bottles sold for an astonishing $104,587. Today, fewer than 35 bottles of the 1951 Grange remain, with some tucked away in complete vintage collections. Next up, we have the legendary Château Lafite 1947, a wine that defied all odds, a true accident of nature. Now, if you're wondering how much this slice of history will set you back, the average price for a 750 milliliter bottle is a cool $10,226. So if you've got that kind of cash lying around, you know what to do. The year 1947 was marked by extreme heat, the kind that turned the vineyards of Saint-Éliman into a fiery furnace. Harvest began 2 weeks ahead of schedule, under a scorching sun that left grapes shriveled and high in sugar. The land had barely recovered from the ravages of war, with vines missing and the once thriving cellars reduced to near-empty shelves. The barrels were old and worn out, bottles, corks, and labels scarce. Even getting fresh hoops for the barrels seemed impossible. The winemaking world was on its knees, but somehow, the vintage would become a symbol of resilience and innovation. The vineyard team, led by the intuitive Gaston Vassier, resorted to the unthinkable. Ice cubes were added to the vats in an era where refrigeration didn't exist. Yet even this could not tame the wild fermentation. The wine turned out to be unusually high in alcohol, with a port-like character that was entirely unexpected for a Bordeaux wine. Despite the dire circumstances, something extraordinary happened. By the time it was bottled, no one had foreseen that this 1947 vintage would be among the finest Cheval Blanc wines ever produced, defying the principles of modern winemaking. Its richness, concentration, and depth stood in stark contrast to the adversity that it brought into being. What started as an act of desperation became a monumental triumph, a vintage so rare, it has since become a coveted treasure for collectors around the world. Next up, let's talk about Domani della Romanée-Conti, 1945. This wine isn't just old. Oh no. It's got a story that will make you feel like you're sipping on liquid history. So picture this. It's 1945, the world is crawling out of the wreckage of World War II, and people are picking up the pieces of their lives. Nature's on a healing spree too, and in Burgundy, France, the Romanée-Conti vineyard is quietly making history. Why? Because these vines had been through a lot. They survived phylloxera, the vineyard equivalent of a bad breakup, so they were basically on their last legs. But guess what? The 1945 vintage was their final mic drop. This wasn't just any wine. The grapes were rare, concentrated, and oozing with flavor. It wasn't much wine, but what was made? Pure gold. And because only a handful of bottles were produced, it's one of the rarest wines in the world, like the unicorn of the wine world. Fast forward to 2018, one of these precious bottles hits the Sotheby's auction block. The bidding war was so heated, you'd think they were bidding on the last bottle of air on Earth. Real estate mogul Rob Rosania came in swinging with a paddle, eventually snatching up the bottle for a staggering $558,000. That's more than my rent and vacation combined. Oh, and he didn't stop there. He grabbed the second bottle too, for $496,000. You know, just pocket change. Why did it go for that much? Simple. There were only 600 bottles ever made, and most of them are long gone. These vines were like the Avengers of the wine world, surviving it all and leaving behind a legacy. Plus, this bottle came from the personal stash of Robert Drouin, a wine legend whose family was involved with DRC wines for decades. Talk about a top-tier pedigree. While you might not get to taste a 1945 Domani della Romanée-Conti, you can explore Burgundy Pinot Noirs that offer a glimpse into the region's elegance and complexity. Imagine you're transported to France, 1869, an era where powdered wigs were still a thing, and people thought a good conversation starter was, "So, which revolution are you into?" Now, in the midst of all that chaos, there's one name that rises above the rest of the world in wine: Lafite Rothschild. And by this time, it's practically a monarchy in the wine world. When the Rothschild family snapped up Château Lafite in 1868, they weren't just buying a vineyard. They were securing a passport to wine royalty. Fast forward to 1869, and Lafite is ready to release its first vintage under the Rothschild reign. The buzz was so thick you could practically bottle it, as rumors spread like wildfire about a wine so good it might just make you believe in magic. But here's the deal. Only a handful of bottles were produced, making it rarer than a unicorn in a top hat. Now picture this. 150 years later, a lone bottle of this legendary wine is hauled out of some dark cellar. Its contents as ancient as your grandma's secret cookie recipe. It's dusted off and sent to auction where, spoiler alert, things get a little wild. The bidding starts like a slow, polite round of who wants to buy this wine. But then, it turns into a full-blown sprint. Fingers on paddles, hearts racing until the hammer drops at a staggering $233,972 for that one bottle. Yeah, you read that right. Over $230,000 for wine. You could probably buy a house, or at least a pretty nice sports car for that. And guess what? The winning bid came from an anonymous bidder in Asia, a person who clearly didn't mind dropping the equivalent of a small fortune on a drink that, let's be honest, would probably just leave you feeling fancy at a dinner party. Who was this mysterious bidder, you ask? Well, that's the million-dollar question. Literally. We'll never know the identity, but I like to think it was someone who had just been waiting for the chance to make an entrance at a gala, casually saying, "Oh, this? Just a bottle of 1869 Lafite, no big deal." As for the wine itself, you could say it's the Beyoncé of Bordeaux. Timeless, elegant, and impossible to forget. The flavor? Oh, it's a journey through history with rich tannins, smoothness that could make you rethink your life choices, and a complexity that tells stories of empires, revolutions, and probably a few bad haircuts along the way. To drink this wine was to sip on centuries of history, wars, and maybe a little bit of aristocratic gossip. So next time you're eyeing a bottle of wine, just remember there's a rarefied world out there where a single bottle could cost you enough to buy a small country. Next up, we move to a wine with a story unlike any other. Taylor's Scion 1855 Tawny Porto. Picture this: a small secluded village in the Douro Valley, Portugal, in the mid-1800s. A family devoted to crafting the finest Porto meticulously bottles a creation, unbeknownst to them, will outlive them all. This wine, stored in wooden casks, will endure wars, revolutions, and a mysterious pest that devastates the vineyards of Portugal, phylloxera. For over 150 years, it has been hidden, passed down through generations as an heirloom, untouched and never revered. Fast forward to 2008, Taylor's winemaker David Guramais heard whispers about this ancient, forgotten Porto. Curiosity takes him to Douro Valley, where he learns of the rare casks still intact in a family lodge. In 2009, after the last family member passed, the wine was sold. Taylor's secures the cask, and when they taste it, they're floored. It's flawless, remarkably fresh, untouched by time. Rather than blending it into their other reserves, they decide to bottle it as a one-off. In 2010, Taylor's Scion 1855 was born, a piece of history sealed in crystal decanters. Just 1,400 bottles released to the world. What makes it rare? It's not just the age, it's the centuries of care, the hands that held it, and the legacy it carries. This isn't just a wine, but a living memory of a time long gone. Next up, we step into the world of rarefied elegance Château Lafite 1811, a vintage that almost never was. The year 1811 was a time of turmoil, Europe still reeling from the Napoleonic Wars. Yet in the heart of Bordeaux, amidst the chaos, the winemakers of Château Lafite crafted a wine destined for legend. What makes this vintage extraordinary isn't just the impeccable conditions, it's the incredible journey that unfolded from vine to bottle. The 1811 vintage was born from a perfect storm. The weather that year in Bordeaux was unparalleled. A warm, dry summer followed by a long, gentle harvest, giving the grapes a unique concentration of flavors. But even as the grapes ripened to perfection, the world surrounding them was far from stable. With Napoleon's reign crumbling, Europe was caught in a web of uncertainty, yet somehow, this wine flourished in the midst of it all. As the bottle of 1811 aged, it was carefully sealed away, its existence almost forgotten. It wasn't until 2011 that it resurfaced, 150 years later, when a single bottle broke records, selling for $117,000. What makes the Château Lafite 1811 so cool isn't just the age or the craftsmanship. It's the fact that this wine was like the James Bond of the vino world, dodging wars, revolutions, and centuries of chaos, all while keeping its cool and maintaining top secret status until it finally hit the spotlight. Last but definitely not least, we have the Massandra Chérie de la Frontera 1775. A wine so rare it feels like a secret from the past. The story behind this bottle is fascinating. It starts in Spain, where the best Chéries were made for royalty and the elite. But what makes this wine truly special is what happened after it was created. In the late 1700s, during a time of war and chaos, a shipment of this fine sherry was sent to Crimea. As the bottles made their way across dangerous lands, some say they were hidden away to protect them from being stolen or destroyed. Years went by and the wine was forgotten, buried in cellars, safe from the world's wars and changes. Then, years later, Massandra's cellars were open, and there, in the dark, was this incredible bottle from 1775. The Massandra Chérie de la Frontera 1775 isn't just rare because of its age. It's a reminder of the people, the places, and the history that shaped it. To taste it is to take a step back in time, savoring not just wine, but a piece of history that has survived through the centuries. Which of these rare wines would you most want to try? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the world of wine.